Hello, you are listening to Josh Films and That. I am your host for this week, Josh Hallam, and I'm joined, as ever, by the wonderful Alice Oliver. Alice, how you doing?
Oh, always good when you call me wonderful. I'm very well, thank you. How about yourself?
Yes, I'm good, thank you. This is, of course, the podcast where we're going to talk about a film, aren't we, Alice? We're going to talk about an underrated film, an underseen film.
There are categories.
That's the two main ones. There's other ones as well. But yes, I am very well. I'm very excited because we're joined by another guest, aren't we, Alice?
We are indeed.
We are.
Very exciting.
He is a filmmaker, amongst other things. Warren Dudley, welcome to the podcast. How are you, sir?
Very well, guys. Thank you very much for having me.
It's absolute pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure. So, if you haven't listened to it before, Warren, we always start with a completely random question. I'll go to Alice first. It's quite a simple one this week. I put it out on Twitter for some questions, and my favourite one was a little question from Ian Davis that just said, "Alice, what's your favourite pot noodle?"
Oh, sweet and sour. Easy.
What? They do a
Easy.
sweet pot noodle?
Sweet and sour. Pot noodle. Yeah, the blue one, the light blue one. Sweet and sour
Is that
pot
what
noodle.
flavour that is?
Oh, yeah. It's the only one I eat. It's the only one I eat. It's the best one. It's the only one that's worth your money. I'm telling you, don't be wasting your money on none of this chicken, curry, and the Bombay, the one that's far too hot. Nah, sweet and sour is where it's at. It's delicious. It's perfect. They nailed it.
I've never had that one.
It's the only one. It's the only one for me. Literally the only one. Like I had my first one when I was a teenager, and I was such a health nut when I was a teenager. And one day I was like, oh, you know what? I fancy something dead naughty, a pot noodle. So I went and I got the sweet and sour one. Best thing I've ever eaten in my life.
So that's the blue one.
The light blue one. So it's
Right.
light blue, okay? Not just
Right.
because there's two. There's a dark blue one and a light blue one.
Write
It's
this
the
down,
light blue
guys.
one.
Write it down. It's the light blue one. All right.
What
it's the
about
light-
you, Josh? Are you a
So-
pot noodle connoisseur?
I'm not a particular pot noodle connoisseur. Obviously, you got the classic chicken and mushroom
Meh.
and the beef. Is it beef and tomato, the red one?
Who knows?
Do you know
It's
what the
not light
best
blue.
one?
I'm not looking at it.
The best one for me was, I think it was the 2014 World Cup. They brought out like a Brazilian beef or something like that.
Oh, interesting.
That
Yeah.
was really good. That one was really good. But I'm not a particular connoisseur. But yeah, if I had to, it's Brazilian beef from 2014. So we've got
But not a connoisseur. Not a connoisseur, but here's
Listen,
the year.
Of all the ones I've tried, the specific year and type,
Stays
What?
with you, doesn't it? A good
The-
pot noodle.
a vintage pot noodle from 2014, Brazilian beef. Probably can't get them anymore. It's like Golden
Brilliant.
Graham's. I've tried, Alice. I've tried. You know I've tried, and I
Come
won't
on,
pay.
if you're willing to pay £80 on eBay, you'll get them. Come on, Josh, try harder.
What about you, Warren? Do you like a pot noodle?
Oh, I am a connoisseur. As you say, 2014 was a good year.
was.
No,
An excellent year.
I am going to go for the Bombay bad boy, I'm afraid. I've kind of did the curry one, and the curry was my gateway pot noodle. And then I've ended up at the Bombay one, which is so hot. But I do eat too many pot noodles probably, but the key to a pot noodle, right, here it is to put the water in, but the boiling hot water, but leave it for ages. Leave it for 25 minutes.
Longer.
25
it's just-
minutes.
Then it's
Yeah.
so delicious. A pot noodle is just fantic after that amount of
A
time.
saturated
So-
pot noodle.
Yeah,
I get
exactly.
that.
So
I
I
totally
come
get
with
that.
pot noodle
Knowledge.
tips. Who'd have
Brilliant.
thought?
Have you ever grabbed a block of cheese and chopped it into tiny little blocks and put that in there? I've done that
What?
sometimes.
Oh, no.
And you've got melty cheese in
I'm
your pot
not-
noodle.
I'm never averse to putting cheese on anything. So
Alice,
pot
good.
noodles is a new one though. That's
Alice,
great.
are you all right?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
What's
Listen, what about once a year when I really want to treat myself, when I think, oh, I've done well this week on my salads and go in the gym and all that, I'll have a pot noodle, slice up some cheese, whack it in. Ooh, melty cheese.
I've
with
never
the pot
thought
noodle.
about
No,
Oh, I
me
think
neither.
about
I've
putting
never-
cheese on everything. mate.
Yeah, well, that's true.
that. My
If it
favourite part
can-
about that little interchange there with Warren was with my tip with the pot noodles, and he went, is 2. And I thought he just went, my favourite tip for the pot noodles is 2. And no, it's just 2. I eat 2.
That's
So anyway, there you go. Write in, tweet us. What is your favourite pot noodle? We'd love to hear from it. We've got.
Do you agree with our pot noodle
we've
opinions?
We've got light blue with cheese, Bombay Bad Boy, and one that they don't get anymore that I chose from 2014. So anyway, let's move on to talking about this week's film, which is The Disaster Artist from, I think, 2017. So spoiler warnings if you've not seen it. Now, Warren, you chose this one. You had a couple of choices in mind, but you settled on this one in the end.
I did.
So what's it about and why did you pick it? Is it underrated? Is it underseen? First of all, tell us what it's about, and then let's hear why
Well,
you picked it.
It's about a man of indeterminate age and accent who comes to America, who knows when, and to set out to be an actor, and ends up funding his own movie, which goes on to become famously one of the worst films ever made. And it's basically his story through the eyes of James Franco, who plays him in the film. But so it's, with regards to it being underseen, it's a bit of a cheat, really, because I think the original film probably is underseen.
Well, yeah.
The Disaster Artist maybe not so much.
Maybe not anymore. I mean, it's got quite the cult following. Yeah, so if you don't know, it's based on the making of a real film called The Room, which was then the chap who was in, one of the chaps who was in the film, Greg Sestero, went on and wrote a book about his experiences, which they then turned into this film with James Franco and his brother and Seth Rogen and stuff. So yeah, so that's what it's about. It's based on that true story. So why did you pick this one? Is it underrated?
Well, again, it's a bit of a I'm being a bit cheeky, I suppose, because I've got two films to look at here, and we've got the Room and the Disaster Artist in a way. But I don't know if it's underrated. I think it was fairly well received, but a lot of people haven't seen it still. I think when I've sort of chatted about it, people have been sort of none the wiser a lot of the time, and I think it's a shame because it's incredibly funny. The story, his story, and the character, the man Tommy Wiseau, is one of a kind. An incredible character, and no, I would highly recommend it if you haven't seen it.
So, I mean, you're a filmmaker, Warren. Do you relate to any of the stories?
Well, yes, that's kind of another reason I chose it. Really, is because obviously I can sort of see a lot of what he's trying to do, and what the most staggering thing is the amount of money he spent on it,
and where that money came from.
Who knows?
So, I mean, for example, there's a bit in it where he refuses to give everyone on the set any water. I take it you've never done that one before, Warren.
I've not done that. No, exactly. No, that is true. It's one of the very few rules. Is just keep your cast and crew fed and watered.
A basic human right.
It is. Yeah.
Is water. So, Alice, I think you might have let on that you'd seen this one before, but I can't remember. Had you seen this one before?
Yes, I had seen this. I saw it when it came out. I was very excited about it coming out. So I am a fan of The Room for my own reasons, for various reasons, as an observational sort of almost documentary-like piece of cinema, right? So I was excited when this was coming out, and when I saw it, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was really funny. I thought it was written really well. I thought the performances were really good. So there was a little bit of me that was like, whoa, when I go back to it to watch it with this critical eye, what am I going to see? Am I going to see the same things? Am I going to feel the same way? And I certainly think that on that second viewing, after you've already seen it, of course, it does have less impact, but it is still a very, very good film. And I perhaps thought it was maybe a bit funnier in places the second time round, but I think the overall impact was slightly less. But yeah, really enjoyed watching it, really enjoyed making notes on it and looking at it at that level. What about you, Josh? I don't even know if you've seen this.
So no, similar to you, I wouldn't say I'm a fan of The Room. I became aware of The Room. So obviously it's got that cult-like status for the reason that Warren said, which is it was up there and considered to be one of the worst films ever made. Now, from my recollection, I don't know if either of you guys will be able to correct me, that cult following didn't come about straight away. Because I remember starting to hear about this film and seeing YouTube clips of it, and all the clips that we've seen, You're Tearing Me Apart, Lisa, Oh Hi Mark, or all the things that we've seen that are in the Disaster Artist as well, probably about 10 years after it's made, maybe 8 years after it's made, because I must have been at university. And I think it was, maybe 2010, something like that. So I became aware of The Room. And again, like you, Alice, when I found out they were making The Disaster Artist, I was really excited because of the nature of what I knew about the film and the fact that it became a bit of a running joke. So I had seen this before. I'd only seen it once before. I didn't see it at the cinema. I think I saw it when it first came out on streaming or DVD or whatever it would have been at the time. So I was also interested to go back with it with a critical eye. So let's get stuck into it then, Warren. Obviously, you'd seen it before. So what do you like about the film, Warren? What is it you particularly like about the film, apart from the fact that it's just funny?
Well, as you said earlier, it's kind of the filmmaking side of it is really funny because there's so much you can see just on a film set that he's doing. That it's just so sweet. It's so sweet that he wants to do what he's doing, but what I like about it. Wow, it's just it's him, isn't it? It can't get past with the disaster artist Tommy Wiseau. You can't if you don't like or find him fascinating, then the film's not going to work, is it?
No.
But he is just such an incredible character, like a dropped down from another planet, and I just love him. And again, this journey he's been on from what he wanted to make and what he's ended up making is interesting again, because like you say, when you watch it a second time round and you now know a bit more about him. I've seen him on American chat shows. I've seen him, talking a lot about the Room, pretending he made it as a comedy. Bless him. But on the second watch, I think I agree actually, is that I laughed more the second time round than the first time. The first time I found it quite sort of touching, but the second time I just laughed a lot more, I think.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because I'm pretty sure he still maintains now that he intended to make it as a comedy. Like, that the reason it was bad is because it was bad on purpose. I think that carries with it its own sort of issues and points, which we'll get on to in a little while. But what about you, Alice? So you mentioned a little bit there. So what did you like about it when you watched it again?
So the two main things that I felt impressed by with the film is the comedy, and so everything involved with that, so the performances, the script, etc., and the way in which they've been able to tell a story that is based on true events, right? So the pacing of it, making sure the audience are getting all the information they need without these huge exposition dumps or like lines and lines of information, but ultimately uninteresting dialogue. So I think the way in which the film unfolds from a storytelling point of view is very strong, and each plot point and line of action seem to flow well into one another. And just to mention one moment or one point is that, so I don't think, and do correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I don't think at any point during the film it's explicitly said that Tommy doesn't drink alcohol, right? But for the first few scenes where we see him socializing, he's drinking cans of Red Bull. And then later on when he's in a nightclub, he's drinking what looks like from a mug, right? So it looks like he's drinking a cup of tea in this nightclub. So obviously you infer from that, you look at the meaning, it's like, oh, he doesn't drink. Why doesn't he drink? What happened there, sort of thing. And I do believe that's accurate. Warren, you may know better than me, but I'm pretty sure they never explicitly say, like, he doesn't say, oh yeah, Tommy doesn't drink, or oh yeah, I don't drink, or whatever. And it is just inferred through these little moments. It's not mentioned, is
it? I watched it this afternoon, and it's not mentioned. But you're right. You're right. It's the Red Bull he drinks, isn't it, all the time? Seems to be his tipple.
So does anyone know if he drinks in real life?
I'm not sure.
No,
I don't know. Again, I saw him. I just watched an interview earlier. He was on Seth Meyers' show in America.
Yeah,
and he could have been drunk, but then he might just be Tommy.
he's such a he's such a strange guy, and I think the mystery around him is obviously one of the things that lures people into the Room and to this as well, because it's how old is he, where has he come from, how does he have all this money? It's all that sort of stuff. There's a real mystery, and whether he's cultivated that on purpose or whether he's just quite odd, it never answers that question. It's hard to know. So what else, Alice? What did you think of the performances in it? What did you think of that sort of side of things?
Yeah, so I thought pretty much the performances across the board were really, really good. The cast was brilliant. You've got such a good supporting cast in there. So Megan Mullally, who I do want to touch on, who she's just brilliant, isn't she? Like, just seeing her on screen, she always delivers. And it's like Tommy's sort of vision of her is kind of like the evil mum who won't let her son play out with Tommy or move in with Tommy and all this. But like, she is asking perfectly rational questions, right? Like, of a 19-year-old son. It's like, you've known a guy for maybe a couple of days. Now you're going to go move in with him in a different city? Gosh, this seems odd, sort of thing. And Tommy's just like, chill out, whatever. But it's such a crazy situation that she's in. It's like she's got to suss him out, isn't she? So she comes out to the car and she's like looking him up and down, and she's like trying to figure out
how old are you?
Well, and what the heck is this guy about? Like, who is this guy who wants to suddenly live with my son, who I've never heard of before? It's not like one of his childhood friends or something. And she's like, oh yeah, that guy, that's cool. Like, it's totally bonkers. But yeah, performances, I think, there were no bad ones as far as
No.
I'm concerned, or at least not any that I noticed. What about you, Josh?
It's like you say, it's got a great cast in it because obviously you've got James Franco and his brother Dave, who are the two leads. You've got Seth Rogen in there, but also you've got a really good supporting cast in there as well because you've got Seth Rogen playing Sandy. You've got Zac Efron in like 2 scenes
Efron, yes.
playing Chris R. You've got Josh Hutcherson who plays I can't remember the character's name, the little sort of teenage boy who seems to live with them in the room.
Oh yeah, crazy.
So you got a really good Ari Grainer as well. I think is really good in this as Lisa.
I spotted Bob Odenkirk.
Bob Odenkirk's in there as
Yeah.
it's like a Stanislavskian teacher, isn't he?
Oh, and Bryan Cranston's in there as well, but he's
in
as
there.
himself, isn't he?
Yeah. Alison
funny.
Brie. Alison Brie's in it as Greg's girlfriend. But yeah, I mean,
Judd Apatow, like this.
Judd Apatow's in there. I forgot about that one as well. Yeah. So then, I mean, I mean, the lead performance is obviously James Franco who plays Tommy, and he does. There's clearly a lot of effort gone into playing. He's not doing, he's not doing an SNL sketch. He's not doing an impression. He is. I do think he is pretty good in this as Tommy. I think he's pretty believable. Obviously, makeup and hair and all that goes a long way to helping him, but he does little things in there. There are certain bits where I think he overdoes it, but for example, Tommy has that laugh, doesn't it? It's like that sort of thing. And James Franco does it a bit too much, but when he first does it, you are like, that is Tommy. And it's hard to know, isn't it? Is it because he's sort of doing an impression of Tommy as Johnny in the room? Because does anyone really know what Tommy Wiseau's like?
No, I don't think so.
It's like someone playing someone who no one actually knows. It's like Daniel Day-Lewis playing Lincoln. Well, no one knows what he sounded like. So is his accent right? Mm-hmm. Well, it's based on X, Y, and Z. So hopefully, or Tom Hardy playing Charles Bronson. It's like, well, he somehow seems to have recordings of his voice to do his voice. But is that what he's like? You can't actually. I suppose you can't corroborate the accuracy. Is the point, isn't it? So no, I think James Franco's performance is really good. Dave Franco is obviously less melodramatic in his performance, but is very much like you say, you're seeing a lot of the film through his eyes. You're being taken on the journey and Tommy's journey with his character, and I think he's really good in it. So, and the fact that they're brothers as well is quite that must be quite an odd experience as a parent.
That's true.
Watching your 2 sons play 2 real life people.
I did notice something watching this afternoon that he has got one of the worst stick-on beards.
Oh yeah, that's pretty bad. The beard's pretty bad
in film history, I reckon. That was poor. I looked at that and thought, God, that's obviously you couldn't grow it quick enough.
But then obviously,
so they've gone with makeup, but not great. But that was quite funny.
But then with a film like this, you could just say that's a tribute to the room.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. That's what I was thinking.
It is a pretty bad beard as well. So I think something that I liked about it as well is obviously it's got some really interesting stuff to say about a bit like The Room in terms of it's quite an interesting, I think, exploration of things like ambition and blind faith and a little bit the lore of the American dream, if we're going to get deep into it. That idea of that's what he wants is like... So I've read a little thing about Tommy Wiseau, which is I think as he's got older, he's been a bit more willing to share the odd bit of information. Like I think it's now confirmed that he is... I think he's Polish or something like... He's not American, is he?
New Orleans.
Yeah. But people say, where are you from? And he'd say things like, I'm as American as apple pie. And it's, well, you're not, are you? Like that sort of thing. But I thought that was really interesting. The biggest thing that I noticed second time round, you're right, what you both said is right, I laughed a little bit more as well. But what I didn't notice the second time round, because the first time you watch a film, you're obviously just looking at the plot and following it. And because you're following it, you don't necessarily always notice the little details. But when I watched it this time round, the effort that goes into recreating the room is immense. Mm-hmm. Like if there was an Oscar for that, this film would have won it. And there isn't an Oscar for best recreation of another film.
Yeah,
but they even show it at the end side by side, and it's spot on. So it must have been quite painstaking, the effort. I mean, I've never, apart from the odd stupid little sketch and stuff, I've never made a full length film. My brother's done a bit, and obviously my partner's done a bit as well. How difficult would that be, Warren, to make as a filmmaker to make another film and recreate it? How difficult would it be?
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, you have got the film to look at. So you're looking at a 16:9 image, and you've got to basically go and buy that pot plant, that window frame, that. So you creating it. I imagine once you've got, in front of you what you need to recreate, I wouldn't have thought it's just like you say, painstaking, not difficult. I wouldn't have thought, just painstaking, and the camera moves and the direction has got to be exactly the same. But you're right, those scenes at the end, really good. You watch them together, and one of my favourite little bits in it. It's one of the famous bits, isn't it? When he goes into the shop and buys the flowers. It's just what I love about that in the original room. So much of the original room is ADR'd, so it's not the original dialogue. So it's been dialogue recorded back over the dialogue, and it's so bad in the room. Some of the ADR. It's hilarious, but and that scene is particularly. Neither of the actors are speaking. You can tell they're not speaking live. It's all been done afterwards.
I suppose. Do either of you believe that The Room is a comedy?
No.
Oh no!
I wonder if anyone does. I wonder if anyone actually is like, no, this is a really subversive, well-crafted comedy that's wrapped up in the enigma of being a shit film.
Oh no, there are no jokes, are there?
No, well that's it, isn't it?
And it's not funny.
There's no
in that way.
There's no setups and punchlines, is there? No, exactly. It's not funny for that reason, is it? It's just really. Again, without him and his performance, it's just a really sort of poor, Sunday afternoon indie movie type affair, isn't it? But his performance is so ludicrous and over the top that's what just sort of thrust it into the the sort of pantheon of world's worst films, isn't it? Because if he'd just been a sort of an average performance from a leading man, the film's nothing, is it? It's just boring. But because he's so hilarious.
I'll tell you what, I'll ask you this then. I'll ask you first, Alice. Is The Room the worst film you've ever seen?
This is hard to quantify, right?
It is difficult.
How are we judging that? Is it technically, so unorthodox that it doesn't actually create a super pleasant viewing experience? Maybe technically, but if you look at the legacy of it, the conversations it starts, the feeling I have when I watch it, the feeling I have when I talk about it, I can't say that it is the worst film, because there are some films that have made me feel nothing. Yeah. And surely they're the worst films ever made. The ones where I'm just like, what the fuck?
Because that's an interesting point. I mean, I think if you're gonna get into like technically and all that. So for me, I suppose what I was thinking was about you was your reaction as an audience member, plain and simple, because all the technical, there's plenty of films that have got loads of technical expertise in them where I've come away and been like, meh. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of those sorts of films, $200-300 million films that you've come away and gone, whatever.
Yeah. Indifferent. I'm indifferent to you, film.
Yeah, and that's almost the worst experience. I imagine as a filmmaker, the worst experience you want is nothing. At least if someone doesn't like it, they had a reaction.
Definitely, yeah.
I was going to say, Warren, what would you say to that?
Yeah. Oh, certainly. It's I've made a film called Cage about 4 or 5 years ago, and my God, the reviews of that are up and down. Right. Some utter hate online for it, but also some people love it. But I'd much rather that. I'd much rather, the worst thing you can is people saying, yeah, it was all right, that. Yeah, it was all right. That's just, you think, all that time I've spent on that. I'd much rather you said you hated it in a way and if as many people say they love it, indifference is the worst thing for a filmmaker, because that's just, it seems like a waste of time. If
there's
all
nowhere
you're getting
to go.
is indifference. No, it's just
there's nowhere to go from that.
No, exactly. And if people just go, yeah, it was all right, then you think, oh.
But at least this way you've got a reaction, I suppose. So what about you, Warren? Is The Room the worst film you've ever seen?
Same thing. I don't think. It's an impossible question to answer, because on what basis? Technically rubbish, isn't it? It's technically poorly directed, poorly acted. The script's terrible. But like you say, I've seen films we've sat down and got 45 minutes into and just thought, this is terrible, boring.
I've switched films. I've got to the stage now where I'll switch a film off if it hasn't grabbed me in an hour.
Yeah, well, a lot of the time now with streaming and all that stuff is an hour. If you get an hour out of someone, you've done very well. You have to get them quick.
Yeah, you do.
If you're making indie movies, you've got to get them quick, because if you can't expect to have half an hour to slowly engage an audience.
In fact, I think there's two films by the same team, in terms of that group of comedians behind this, that I have switched off within about half an hour, 45 minutes. I definitely switched off Sausage Party.
Oh, yes, I didn't know it was that bad, you know.
I just couldn't get into it. But sometimes it depends what mood you're in, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
I wouldn't, and I'd never have, if someone could convince me, there's been plenty of times when like you've picked a film on this podcast and I've had to watch it because I have to watch it for this. And you've turned me round or gone, yeah, but did you think about this? And I've gone, yeah, well, yeah, I get that. Not Grease 2, Alice, but that's fine.
Yeah,
that's
whatever. You keep telling yourself that, Josh. I know what your heart wants. More Michelle.
I'm trying to think the other one. Oh, The Interview, which is also Seth Rogen and James Franco, the one that almost started World War III. Remember that one? Do you know the one I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah. I think we sat through that whole. I've got a bit of a vested interest in these films we're talking about because my wife has got an enormous crush on James Franco.
So
I know. So that's a bit of a problem with turning those films off.
Okay, so what else? What else did you like about it, Warren? Is there anything else that particularly stands out for you, or have we sort of covered everything there?
Well, again, again, it's back to a bit of a boring filmmaker thing, but I just think of the $6 million. The amount of money I spend on my stuff, and you think $6 million, and that's when you look at it on screen and think, where's that? Where does $6 million go there? Because it's all tight green screen sets. Yeah. So there's no big expansive cinema happening, is there?
No.
But if you've got a bunch of people, who I imagine he did, who are just out to fleece him, which is a bit sad, really. I imagine during the room he got fleeced by a lot of people who were just out for the cash. And of course, why not? They're probably thinking, again, going back to when you adapt a book, I'd be really interested to know how much of it is true. I'd be interested to know, but also don't care because it would take away from the film a little bit, I think. Because I bet you'll find a lot of those things didn't happen.
Well, I know that they
dramatized for your pleasure.
Exactly,
of course.
Yeah. Because you have to do that with an adaptation. You have to add in lots of stuff, like the bit about, which I loved, when he said, no, we don't rent, we're going to buy the equipment. And then he said, are you shooting HD or 35mm, both? And they put both cameras next to each other. I thought, did that happen? I hope it did.
Well, I know it's funny to talk about the adaptation of the book. I know that the ending is falsified, as in on purpose. They actively came out and said that because at the end they all cheer and laugh, don't they, when he shows the film? But I know in real life, people who were actually there said it was more of they didn't know what to make of it. So there was awkward laughter and silence and that sort of thing. But they changed the end to reflect the reaction of people in cinema screenings now, because obviously they still tour with the film. They still put it on in places like independent cinemas like the Prince Charles in London and other ones up and down, all over the world. And I know that both Greg and Tommy, they tour with it, don't they? And they'll do Q&As and they'll meet people and they'll watch it to the point where it's become a little bit, I believe, I've not seen it myself, but it's become a little bit something like akin to something like the Rocky Horror Show, which is where you can go in with a script and you can shout back at it and you might throw stuff about, or it's become an experience like Secret Cinema rather than just a film that people think is rubbish. So I think the fact that they changed the end, I mean, it's not a problem. I think it completely makes sense. But yeah, like you say, they definitely must have altered some stuff. I mean, I don't know, were they quite, because I think the book's written by Greg Sestero, isn't it? Is it written? Is it written?
Yes,
yeah.
It is, yeah.
So are they quite kind to Tommy, like in terms of because it alludes slightly to him at points being a bit difficult, like with the bit that we talked about before with the water and the air conditioning and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But it never paints that out as being malicious. It paints that out as not knowing what he's doing.
Yes, and there is a difference there, isn't there? But it was a 60-day shoot. So you can't imagine it was all plain sailing with him, can you? You can imagine it was pretty hard.
And that's quite long, isn't it? 60 days is quite long for a film of this kind, isn't it?
For an indie, 60 days is crazy. I was just going back to the premiere night they had. There are fewer more awful evenings than a premiere of a film you've spent 18 months on. Honestly, it's the most nerve-wracking, awful evening because you sit there, you just think, I've spent so much time, every waking hour on this thing for the last 18 months. And you can feel a room. I mean, you can feel it in there. It's such a strange feeling. And then you sit there about 40 minutes in and you're desperately hoping you don't see the backs of mobile phones. You sort of think, if people start getting on their phones now, then yes, so I can vouch for those evenings. Not look, I haven't had too many bad experiences, luckily, but it is it's so nerve-wracking. God.
Okay, then. So we've covered all the likes there. We'll move on to things that we perhaps didn't like about the film or that we would change about the film. I'm not sure there's going to be loads here, but I'll come to you first, Alice. How did you feel? Because I know you quite liked the film, right? So going back and seeing it again, did it live up to the first time viewing? Was it just different? Is there things you didn't like? What didn't you like? Is there anything?
So there were 3 things that I've made note of. First off is the shaky cam was too much. It was too much shaky cam. It was too shaky. It was I felt seasick watching it. You know the scene in the iconic scene in Speed 2 when the boat is, crashing into the harbour and stuff, and then it's all proper shaky cam in there because the boat's crashing. Well, it felt like that, and I don't want it to feel like that. So I could have done with a bit less of that. Script-wise, there were a few moments between Tommy and Greg that were particularly cheesy and sort of really stood out as being like quite, whoa, like dump the sugar on that sort of thing. And I don't hate that, but I wonder if there were perhaps more sophisticated ways of getting that across. Like they want obviously to showcase their relationship and their feelings for each other. And I feel like there could have been better ways of doing that, whether through showing us certain actions or just some tweaks to the script. And then just finally, I do wonder if it is isolating if you haven't seen The Room. Like, surely this doesn't mean anything to you. Are you going to be entertained? I don't know. So I wonder if in that it does lose a big chunk of its potential audience because people haven't seen The Room, so they're not interested.
That was probably my main point. Was if you didn't know The Room and the cult nature of it and some of the backstory, would you watch this and think, what am I supposed to make of it? What am I supposed to make of him? What am I supposed to make of the plot as a whole? So I completely agree with that. I think for me, because it's based on real life events, it almost lacks a genre. It almost doesn't have a genre. Like if anything, it's a comedy, right? There's funny bits in it, but I think, like you say, Alice, it probably relies a little bit too much on that, social media viral sensation, The Room, look at this film and all that sort of stuff. So if you don't know or care about that story, then perhaps you wouldn't watch it. And then at the same time, if you didn't know that, and even if you did know that, there are places where I thought, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to feel about the characters. And I think what I mean by that is, are we laughing at the film because Tommy isn't very good? And if so, is that okay? But he sort of embraces it. So is it okay? Because he's pretty much making a living off of it now. So, it's difficult to know, isn't it?
You can, in my opinion, you can laugh at and you can critique people, things, films without being a bellend.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to be mean to him because he's different and he's unwilling to change. He's unwilling to fit into this mold that Hollywood want him to, and he wants to make it anyway. So you can identify, I suppose, parts of his personality that, are perhaps funny for some reason, but just don't be a dick about it. Oh, you're a shit filmmaker, Tommy. You're shit writer, shit this. Like, that's not cool. But I didn't feel like that's what the film was doing.
No, I don't think it is. I suppose it's a wider issue with the whole thing and status around The Room itself, isn't it? But like you say, you can laugh at something without being mean-spirited. And I mean, I suppose it comes down to that thing of, if he doesn't know, like, you can laugh at whatever you want, can't you? In the privacy of your own head and your own home and all that sort of thing. What do you think, Warren? Was there anything that you didn't like about it? And what do you think around the whole idea of laughing at the project and the result and Tommy and all that sort of stuff?
Again, only one person knows whether that's acceptable or not, and that's him, isn't it?
Exactly.
Only he can be the judge of whether he's happy with us all, because we are laughing at him, and he says in the film, whether he said it in real life, I don't know, that people don't like me. And you sort of think, I wonder, but we don't know. If he's absolutely happy with it, then we should be. And we'll never know whether he is or not. So, and I'm just a sucker for someone who has a go.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that he's the ultimate, I'm going to have a go at this. And, you can argue he failed initially, but he had a go.
Well, that's it, isn't it?
That's great. And so, but the subject of whether laughing at him is okay. He knows that. And
No, that's a really good point.
we don't do it.
No,
So
that's
I don't know.
It's a really good point, and ultimately, he's the one laughing because he's made a lot of money off the back of it, regardless of how he feels about it. So, like you say, he has at least put something out into the world, and
well, exactly. But
he still did it. Like you say,
the thing I've recently done is very, very serious and very. If people were laughing at that by the end, giggling and sniggering, heartbroken, you'd be heartbroken, and it would be really hard to turn that into, but at least they're feeling something.
Yeah,
I think I'll just pack it in.
Was there anything else, Warren? Was there anything else you didn't like about it?
I think that you mentioned earlier, not really, but you mentioned earlier the script being a bit hammy at times. But again, there's the argument that is that clever and subversive, or is it a hammy script? Are they being clever by giving us a bit of a hammy dialogue or not? I don't know. But you're right, some of the scenes between the two guys, but then one of the guys is Tommy Wiseau, isn't it? So of course it's going to be ludicrous. It's going to be very hard to, I don't know. But generally, having watched it again today, no, not really. I've sat through it quite happily. It whizzed past again, and that's always a good sign. I never felt like I was, again, like I said earlier, checking my phone. That never came up. So no, I'm a fan.
Great.
What about you, Josh? Was there anything you didn't like?
It's sort of what I said there, really. I think the main point is exactly what you said. There are definitely some issues with the script, which you've touched on there. I completely agree there. And there's also the thing, like we touched on, of it relies pretty much solely on the cult and the reaction and the prior knowledge of the room, doesn't it? Like you wouldn't seek this out unless you were one of those people who just goes to the cinema and goes whatever and picks something and goes and watches it. I can see why if you didn't. I suppose it's so specific. It's not broad in any way. It's so specific that you'd have to know to enjoy it. There are films.
I'm sure you're the same as me, you guys as well. When you watch a film based on real people, the first thing you do when the credits roll is get your phone out, isn't it? And start looking for
read
them.
About them, yeah.
And you find who they are, what they look like. And this must have happened so much with this film. People must have gone straight on YouTube afterwards.
It's pretty kind to some of the cast of the room, like casting Zac Efron as Chris R. I'd be made up with that. That's the guy playing Chris R. But no, I understand. When we did the Damned United, Alice, I remember saying to you, I picked it. Obviously, I like football, but you can enjoy the Damned United without knowing anything about Brian Clough. Whereas this, I think, if you don't know about the room, maybe someone could sort of convince you to watch it by saying it's a film about a bad film, but because the way they tackle it, they definitely went all in on the room rather than all in on the broader concept of it's a bad film. They definitely went, no, it's about Tommy. It's about Tommy and his making of the room. So I can see how you wouldn't get on board with it. Okay, then. So we'll move on then to talking about the critical reception, and then we'll sort of try and conclude if it is underrated, if it is underseen, or where does it lie? Where does it lie in the pantheon of the films we've done? So what do you reckon, Alice? How do you think it did? How do you think it did in terms of how widely it was seen? How do you think it did in terms of the ratings?
So I have seen the ratings for this one. I know usually I keep it a secret from me. Well, it's because, Josh, a short while ago, I considered putting it on my list. But then
so Warren ruined it for everybody. Right.
Sorry.
No, not at all, not at all. But then I saw the critical reception and I was like, I thought, oh, that seems quite appropriately rated, actually. So perhaps it isn't underrated. So I think, if memory serves, IMDb got somewhere in the 7s. And then Rotten Tomatoes, I think maybe something similar, but I don't quite recall. But I know it did okay and better than a lot of the films we've done on the podcast.
And in terms of how widely it was seen, would you say, you don't have to obviously guess money figures, but do you think it, how did it do box office wise? All right, make it money back. Was it a hit?
Probably box office wise, it probably did okay because of who's in it. I think that probably carries a lot of weight. But in terms of it being underseen, I think, as Warren sort of alluded to before, it probably isn't that widely seen by people who don't know the room or aren't interested in the room. And are they going to watch this film? Are they going to think to even put it on? But I think maybe when it came out initially, it might have done okay because of the cast.
Yeah. Okay. What about you, Warren? I mean, do you know how it did critically and commercially, or?
Well, again, I've been over the same figures that we could obviously check out the IMDb and looked at some of the critics' reviews. Largely, it was it seemed to go down okay, didn't it? But as you say, 7.3. Well, look, filmmaker wise, you take that all day long. But I'd say that's about fair, wouldn't you? 7.3 sits about.
Well, let's have a look then. So, at the time of recording, it gets, as you say, 7.3 on IMDb. Over on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience give it 85%. The critics give it 91%.
Ooh.
And it averages out at 8. Based on those 3 scores, it averages out at 83%, 83 or 8.3.
Gosh, that's high from the critics.
So that's pretty high.
Oh,
is it appropriately rated, or is it even overrated? What do we think?
I think, look, difficult. I'm a fan. Appropriate for me.
For the critics, I would say is a touch or a tad. That's what I'm going for. Mixing the words together.
A tad overrated.
Overrated with into the 90s there. This would probably be like a high 7 for me, maybe even possibly an 8 going with that audience score, probably more like that.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think we can agree it's appropriately rated. But box office wise, it made just shy worldwide, according to Box Office Mojo, it made just shy of $30 million.
Ooh.
Now that's
what the budget was?
More than that, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Not
all those people.
So that's not
that
a lot.
Set dressing they got to do.
That's not a lot, is it? Like, if you think it's James Franco, Seth Rogen, Dave Franco, it's pretty.
The whole gang.
If you think if you think there's some
Bryan
of the
Cranston, for God's sake.
If you think of some of the comedies they've made, particularly Seth Rogen and James Franco, they've made some pretty big hitters out there. So for me, I would say, and see if you guys agree, I would say it's appropriately rated, but I think it is underseen based on box office and budget. What would you say, Warren?
Yeah, agreed. If that's surprisingly small, I thought you were going to say sort of treble that.
Yeah,
but that is surprisingly underseen.
Unless I've read Box Office Mojo wrong, but it did say it did say worldwide, so I think that is right. So, what about you, Alice?
Yeah, so in the same boat, I reckon, definitely underseen.
Okay. So there we go, another one in the underseen / appropriately rated vault. We don't get many of them, but I was surprised by those box office numbers. I don't know about you, Alice. I was surprised that was quite low.
That is lower than I was expecting you to say, for sure.
So Warren, thank you very much for coming on. So I believe you've got a film coming out. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your stuff? Where can we find it? Let's hear about the film.
Well, my latest film is called 6 Years Gone, and it is a drama, sort of gritty kitchen sink UK drama about a single mum whose little girl goes missing, and we then join the story 6 years later to see how she's dealing with that. It is it's going down incredibly well. I'm really happy with what's happened so far. It's just out sort of 6 weeks, so people can catch that on Amazon Prime at the moment, and it's on various places in the States, but that's probably, I don't know how your listenership is UK based.
No, we have
quite a few American
cousins.
They can go and watch it on Tubi or Prime.
Okay,
and yes, and it's going okay. So my other stuff I've done, I mentioned Cage earlier. I wrote a screenplay for a film called The Bromley Boys, which I'd love you to check out. That was set at the same time as The Damned United.
Oh yes,
Damned
United,
United, 1970. Yeah. So, but a very different feeling movie. That's a sort of light, bright little comedy with Alan Davis and Martin McCutcheon.
Oh, great!
So that was wrote the screenplay for that. So that's kind of where I'm at, really. So I'd love people to go out and see 6 Years Gone.
We'll make sure we put all the links and stuff, and we'll
perfect, guys. Thank you very much.
So it's on Prime.
It is.
Okay, that's great. We'll make sure we send people your way. Social media. Is there social media accounts for the film specifically, or just yourself?
There is 6 Years Gone movie on Facebook. There's 6 Years Gone movie on Twitter. There's 6yearsgone.com website. So it's all over the place. So you can find it and me on those places.
Well, there we go. Well, we'll make sure we throw some, links and
Thank you
stuff
very
out when
much.
this comes out. And thank you very much for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. No, thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it. It's been brilliant fun.
So there we go, another episode in the bag. Thank you very much to Warren for coming on. When this comes out, we'll definitely put links to his films and all his other stuff. Make sure you go and check it out, because I think it's important that you support, indie filmmakers, lower budget films, and that sort of thing. Not everything has to be a massive budget. I think it's important. What would you say, Alice?
Oh yeah, I mean it's all about the story, man.
UK
It's all about
film,
the story.
support UK film as well.
Don't need that big budget. Don't need these glossy Hollywood nonsense. Just give me a good story and I'm hooked.
Absolutely. So yes, well, thank you very much for listening to this episode. We will be back next week with another underrated, underseen film in your ears. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, the email address is filmsandthatpod@gmail.com, and we're on all the social medias, Alice. It's just Films and That on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, any others at the event. We'll probably make a thing. If you click on the link in our bio, there's a link tree that'll take you to all the things you need. And of course, we are wherever you get your podcasts. If you get a chance, give us a little review or a rating. It's very much appreciated. But of course, thank you for listening. And we're also, guess what, on the television, aren't we, Alice?
We're just everywhere, Josh. Absolutely everywhere. So yes, we are on the local TV network every Friday from 6 p.m. So if you live in Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Liverpool, or the northeast of England, you can find us on Channel 7 on Freeview. Or if you live in North Wales or South Wales, you can find us on Channel 8 on Freeview. Or if you have Sky, you can find us on Channel 188. And I believe that's across the UK.
It is.
Look at you.
It is indeed.
Who'd have thought, eh?
Yes, as I said, we'll be back next week with another film. Until then, thank you for listening and cheerio.
Bye.